And welcome in Vertical Pursuit, the podcast. Mike Barrett along with Pastor Mike Tatlock. And we thank you for spending some time with us as always, as we tend to get all over the place in a lot of topics, a lot of issues, and a lot of stuff involving men. But as we've talked about a lot, it's something that we have found that women enjoy as well. And sometimes we time these episodes out. Sometimes we start off with one thought or a topic we think is going to dominate, and it doesn't. Sometimes we stumble into the fact that maybe we're smarter than we think. So in episode 45, we were talking about your life as an NBA team chaplain, as you are for the Portland Trail Blazers, and it was a really interesting dive into not only how it started and how it's evolved with you, but kind of your heart behind it, the fact that you start doing something like that and then it becomes part of you, which I think it is now. And so today, and we haven't had guests very often, but we're proud to have one today and happy to have one, and it connects to what we just talked about. So from NBA team chaplain to chaplain of the Navy, which is crazy, and Milo Curtis is joining us in the posh Vertical Pursuit studios.
This is very posh. Like, I am incredibly impressed. I don't think I've ever been. I mean, the valet service I got when I pulled up was phenomenal.
Pull all the stops for you.
Craft services, there's barbecue.
Craft services, you guys. I mean, the limo that picked me up at the airport.
Exactly.
I was blown away from the very.
Well, we got to
beginning.
make sure we got to treat you right.
This is incredible. Hey, I want you guys to know. So I've been listening to the podcast, man, since you launched it. And I remember when you launched it.
So you're the one.
So I'll leave a review.
That'll be our first.
On this episode. No, because I was actually deployed when you guys launched this, and I pulled into port, and I can't remember how I saw it, but I saw that it had been launched. And
we had a national advertising campaign. You probably Super Bowl maybe.
That's what it was. Actually, I think it was a billboard. I saw.
There you go.
I saw in Berlin. But I want you guys to know, for like my soul, like as a fan, how it was a massive encouragement to me. I was away from family. I was away from home church. To be able to, hear two guys that I know, to hear you guys connecting and networking with other ministries, other folks that are doing some good stuff, and it was just good for my soul.
Good.
So thank you.
Well, and you saying
this.
that is good for our soul. And anytime somebody comes up, and it happens more in our circles, but once in a while somebody will come up and say they heard it, and we hit on a topic that they had been thinking about and maybe didn't know how to talk about it with friends, and which we find is the case a lot, especially with guys who aren't involved in a church or a community group. Not that you have to be, but we find that the conversations oftentimes in those circles maybe doesn't get to a depth that maybe you don't have license to go there as a man. And we've talked a lot about that and tried to encourage men to have those deeper conversations and maybe kick them off with people, and be it spiritual, be it questions you have about the things we talk about, or if it's something you're struggling with in your life, which we find a lot too. So, and I know you have, and we'll talk about it a little later on, but you're starting a podcast as well. And tell us a little about what you're going to be doing, and then I want to get back to the reason why you are a chaplain in the Navy.
Sure. So my daughter, Olivia, and I have started a podcast called Resilient Lineage. And the idea is, she actually came up to me, probably a couple months ago now. And she said, hey, what would you think about doing a podcast together? Now, my daughter is like incredibly proud of her. She feels a call to ministry. She's got a magnetic personality. She's an influencer, not like in the Instagram sense, but like when she walks into a room, she's not there very long, and she's making connections and challenging her peers to deepen their walk with God. She's just great, and I'm so proud of her. So when she said, hey, what would you think about doing a podcast together? It's like, well, let's, kind of talk about it and explore it. So we began to look for who out there is doing an intergenerational podcast. Between I'm Gen X, she's Gen Z, who's doing an intergenerational podcast in the areas of faith, and family, and, the way ahead, and how do you discover God's best? And we couldn't find anything. I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm saying we couldn't find it. So
it's kind of how we felt.
That's the same thing. Yeah.
If it is out there, I welcome to figure out who that is, so I can like pick their brains and figure out how they're doing this. And so I said, well, let's just sit down. So we kind of mapped it out. And so, our objectives with the podcast is to, one, what does it look like, particularly not just two generations to have this conversation, but in a familial context? Because one of the things that I oftentimes get asked or I see is that parents sometimes don't know how to have conversations with their kids about things of God without it turning into a thus saith the Lord or you're grounded type conversation.
Judgment.
Yeah. And so what does it look like to even disciple your kids in a way?
Yeah.
But with that parental hat still on. I mean, it's not an unclear thing, right? And fortunately, we've got a really great relationship to be able to do that. So we've been exploring that. And then, what does it look like, as father and daughter type context? What does it look like to build something you take pride in?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That like, all right, being in the military, we move around a lot. My daughter's about to go to college. So we're getting into the season of life where, going to Home Depot and building a birdhouse is those days are behind us.
Those days are gone.
Yeah, right. On a Saturday morning while mom sleeps in. So it's okay. Well, what does it look like to build, not just build something that we take pride in, but build something that could have an impact on others. And so, and then what does it look like to do that in a way that's biblically grounded, but it's culturally relevant? And then how do you do it in a way that's just fun? And so we sort of laid that out. We're experimenting. We've got, it comes out every Tuesday. So our first episode came out yesterday.
Great.
And,
what platform is it on?
You can find it on Apple Podcasts.
Okay.
You can find it on Spotify.
Okay.
And we've got some episodes in the can, so it comes out every week. So we're consistent in things. And we're having an app. You guys were a benefit, Mike. You were helpful. I'm looking at Mike Barrett. I guess
I know.
Two mics on here.
you and I were chatting. I'm like, how are you guys doing this? So you even fed me some ideas. So you guys have been incredibly encouraging and helping us kind of find a way ahead. So
what I like about it, though, Milo, is because I remember and some of us that are listening right now don't know that we met because we were on staff at church together.
Yeah.
And when Andrew and Olivia came to Grace with you guys, I mean, they were little at the time.
Yeah, Andrew was 7.
Yeah.
And Olivia was 5.
Yeah. And then and we've all stayed in touch, but even like this Christmas when you guys were all back.
Yeah.
And I was standing there and Andrew comes up and gives me a hug from behind. I turn around, who is this grown man?
Yeah.
But even Olivia, because when you said she does have that spark, she has that. And I like the idea of you're found a way, and again, her desires to want to do it.
Sure.
So there's that desire in her, but building something together that whatever this looks like, she'll always have that memory that in this, she's in an evolution now from being at home, being a teenager, now getting ready for college. That's a big transition. And I love that she's including you at that stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
I just to park on that, because by the way, this is how we do our podcast.
Yep.
We make this up as we go. So there's no whatever.
You're off the script.
Oh yeah. We are off the script, but there's a lot of people listening right now. Did you do, like, both of our kids are in ministry and we never told them they had to.
Yeah.
Like, that was nothing we made our kids do. We said, this is your dream and it's our dream and da-da-da. There was no pressure of that. Yet they found their way into that in their own uniqueness. What are one or two things that you've done in your relationship with both Andrew or Olivia that you could look back on and go, we're not perfect. None of us are. There's not a full recipe, but for Olivia to come to you and say, I want to do a podcast together, could you look back to any things and go, that's a payoff for some other intentional things?
I don't know. Yeah. So something comes to mind. I don't know if this will answer the question.
Yeah.
So feel free to tell me if it doesn't. But I think, so I'll say this as a gift I got from my parents that I feel like set me and Bethany up to give it to our kids, which is my parents have always had a very authentic faith. Mm-hmm. My dad has his own small business, and so as a result, I had the chance to see who they were at church, which is who they were at home. And because he had his own small business, I had access to that. Because when your family swings by and stuff like that, I could see that's who he is at work, this is who he is with his neighbors. So there was an authenticity to their faith and to how they chose to do life that I didn't realize, unfortunately, is rather uncommon.
Yeah.
Because I think some kids see their parents at church is not how those parents are at home, which isn't how they are at, dad's different when we go to the company Christmas party with those folks. So and I think there's a lot of unclear messages that are sent through that. Well, where are our priorities actually at as a household? So because I saw that, and then early on, I was kind of challenged with the idea of, like, what does it mean to be a Curtis? Like, when a Curtis walks into the room, what should people expect? Like, just that's a really interesting, or whatever what does it mean to be a Tatlock?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, or a Bear? Like, when that somebody with that last name walks in the room, what should be expected of them? To me, that's a really interesting framing of the question of meaning and purpose and stuff like that. And I think because we always sort of tried to be crystal clear with our kids on that, not in a dogmatic way, but in a way of like, hey, when Curtis is walking into the room, people should go, that's somebody I can trust.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that means I can't lie. That means I should be on time. That means I should honor the people that are in my life. That, there all of a sudden there's all these implications, because not that we're trying to hold up a certain type of reputation as much as it is by doing this, we will maintain a reputation. So I share that to say, we've never created a divide between, well, this is ministry and that's secular work. It's always just been, well, how are you gifted? How are you talented? What are your interests? Let's sit down and look at that and then press into what God has for you. If that's a ministry, great. My son wants to be an accountant. Great. Like, we need honest, ethical accountants. I think the world would be a better place if we had that. So go do that, so that when somebody sees a Curtis name at the bottom of some accounting sheet that was just audited, they know it's good to go. Like, so there, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
And it's important for young people to have a built-in accountability that relates to who they are and who their name is.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, we were talking about this earlier. I think there's a deep and abiding appetite for that, particularly the demographic I work with, which is like, I want to be known for something. That isn't about being famous or popular, but I want that level of stability in my life, that regardless of where I am, these are the guiding principles I'm going to choose to live by.
What I appreciate about that, Milo, and I assumed you were going to go there. By the way, you answered that great.
Okay,
because there's a deep fear in people who moms and dads raising kids with their faith heritage, right? That when they leave the house, they're going to fall under the ways of the world, and no doubt there's no perfect recipe as a parent that can guarantee that to not happen. We know that. You can be the most whatever perfect, if there is that faithful Christian model parent, and your kids are going to make choices. However, statistically, there's been thoughts out there that what turns kids away the most is not they turn to the world, but they've seen the inauthentic faith growing up, like you talked about, the inconsistency, not perfection, like we're not perfect at home, but it's wow, you're like that at church and you're totally not like Jesus at home. I mean, and I love that you spoke into that, because I think there's a lot of parents listening to this going, how can we cultivate that just authentic consistency, not perfect consistency, but authentic consistency. And I love that that's definitely, you're reaping the benefit of that with your kids, with whatever they're pursuing. But there's the relationship you guys have together, and that's really fun to see.
Well, and it's great to see you. I miss you that you don't live here. You're such a gifted teacher. And when you mentioned when you're on staff together at our church, we were blessed to have teaching from both of you, because you're both so very talented at it and different in a way. The contrast I always enjoyed. But Milo, take us back to when you first, chaplain in the Navy. All of a sudden you join you're cooking along. I don't even know how old you would have been at that time when you made that decision. But all of a sudden, and I would come by and not only see you at church, and I'd come by the office once in a while, we'd chat or close the door, we'd talk for a while, and then all of a sudden you're joining the Navy and you're going to be a chaplain. What led to that, and what kind of frame of mind were you in when you had that calling put upon you that you then acted on. And then now it's been how many years?
I've been active duty for 7, and I've been in the Navy for 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did this all come about?
Well, it goes back to being on staff with Mike at Grace Chapel. So when I came on staff, Mike, feel free to clean up the record here if I'm off on any of this. But when I came, my perception is that when I came on, the church was going through a transition, and the church was kind of starting to come on the other side of that. I was one of the first hires on the other side of that.
Yeah.
We had been attending. I'd pastored for 9 years. We took about a year and a half off. I came on staff as the pastor of development and care, which was, I think, a made-up title. So,
here, this will work for you.
This describes. This is vague enough. So, and it was a phenomenal experience, and I was incredibly. I mean, it was a great team, and it was just a really blessed season of ministry. During that season of ministry, the church was growing, and I remember distinctly there was a time when us as an executive team had sat down, and our concern was, as the church grows, our observation of other churches was that the executive team particularly can become insulated from the actual needs within the community. So we were having conversations about how can we not become insulated, keep our thumb on the pulse of what's going on in people's lives who don't know God, aren't pursuing him, or how do we do that? And so we were praying on it, thinking on it. Around that time, I was leading our men's ministry, and we were getting ready for a men's breakfast over the Memorial Day weekend. And I had emailed some guys I knew that were in the service for that men's breakfast about hosting a table to put out their military gear on display, because the theme was like, what does it mean to be a hero? And so we had our first responders and some folks that I was new in the military. And so we had 2 or 3 tables designated to have this stuff on display. But then over the course of the week, I kept getting emails from guys of going, hey, I was in the service, can I bring my flight suit? Or I was in the service, can I bring my flak jacket?
What a great idea.
And all of a sudden, guys I didn't even know were in the service start coming out of the woodwork, and then they're inviting guys to, and they're like, can I? So I think we went from like 2 tables to 8 tables or something like that. So... So it was I'll never forget this. It was a Thursday night. So the Thursday before the Saturday. And it's that night, we've put the kids to bed. Bethany and I are watching a quote unquote show together, which is code for it's her show. I don't really care. I'm doing I'm on
So you're
emails.
watching The Bachelor then?
So I'm checking emails and stuff. And she goes, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm just getting some stuff knocked out. And she goes, watch the show. You're not even paying attention. Do I need to pause it? So I'm like, no, I'm in, right? I'm watching.
The passive-aggressive approach would have been just to pause it and sit and look at you. So
Probably.
She
didn't do that. She did say it. It was during commercial break, right? And so I'm working on these emails. And then, guys, I'll be honest with you. C.S. Lewis has this really great line where he says, there are ideas that are like lightning out of a clear blue sky. And out of nowhere is the idea. What if I was a chaplain in the United States Navy? Could I do that as a reservist? Because I'm getting a lot of these. I was in the reserves. I was in the Guard. And so that idea kind of comes. So I start looking it up. And her level of frustration with me is increasing because I'm not engaged with the show. In fact, it appears that I'm becoming further detached from being in the moment with her. And finally, she pauses it. And she looks at me and she goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm just looking at some stuff. Now, by this point, I've pulled up the Navy Chaplain Corps
job
website,
description and everything.
the application button. What are they asking for? What are the requirements? I'm looking at all this stuff. And she goes, what are you doing? And I said, some stuff. And she's like, no, really, what are you doing? Because now by this point, she thinks I'm looking at porn.
Right.
Right? She's like, I need to see your screen right now. And so I showed her the screen, and it said, United States Navy Chaplain Corps. And she looks at that, looks at me, and goes, no. Don't even think about it. We got a good thing going on here. Stop. I was like, okay. Shut the laptop. Now it's in my head. So Saturday at the men's breakfast, great breakfast, went off great. There's some guys, one of my neighbors had just retired of the Marine Corps, who was a great guy, and he was at the breakfast, and some other guys. And I pulled him aside individually, and I said, hey, so tell me, chaplains in the Navy. And all of them just looked at me and went, yes. And I was like, I don't know what that means. So tell me about it. Like, what was your interactions like? What did you see happen? And they're like, you just keep pressing. So it was actually the next day. I pulled you aside, Talak. And we had done one service outside at Grace. And I found you, and I was like, hey, I need to talk to you. So you and I are walking, and I said, before I take any more steps, I need to know if I have a green light or not. Which I'm sure if on the receiving end, that could be a rather, like, what are you about to say, right?
What does this set it up for?
Yeah, what are we setting up for? And I said, so I'm curious about exploring chaplaincy in the Navy. And you said, interesting. I was just approached about being a chaplain for the Portland Trailblazers.
Wow, same time.
Yep.
Same
It was
time.
Wow. It
Wow.
was same time.
And you, Tal, like you said, why don't we figure this out together?
Yep.
Like, we'll approach the elder team together,
Yep.
get their advice and counsel on this matter. So we did, and the elder team was like, green light.
Yeah.
Like, just keep us in the loop, let us know. So that was sort of the impetus. Over the next 2 years, I went through my training pipeline, going to officer school, then there's a chaplain basic school. And it was through those experiences that the Lord was, it's a funny thing, particularly with ministry. I suppose it could be with anything, where all of a sudden God cools your heart towards something you were once hot about.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we love Grace, loved the ministry we were doing. So this is not a reflection on any of that.
Oh, yeah.
But it was like I could feel God cooling my heart towards those responsibilities, but turning up the heat on chaplaincy. So talked to Bethany. And she's like, we're not doing this. You're not going active duty. Stop thinking. You're just wanting to play G.I. Joe. I was like, you're right. But, and then one day she came up to me and she's like, I think we're supposed to do this. And which was then, now I didn't have any excuses. I couldn't hide behind the skirt of my wife anymore. So I was like, all right, now we got to press ahead. And it's been an incredible journey ever since. And it's, when I share that, because I get asked that question sometimes by folks, and it doesn't go without saying that, I'm fortunate to have come from a church that the day I was commissioned as an active duty chaplain was at one of our church services. Yeah. And so we've been treated as somebody who's been sent by the church. Yeah. And there's a lot of chaplains that don't have that experience. When they said they wanted to go active duty, the church kind of brushed off and we're like, okay, good. That's your thing now. We got to do our thing. And so they don't have that. They don't have that prayer support. They don't have that encouragement. Yeah. And like you guys, we're friends. I mean, we've just been incredibly blessed. And I think because of that, there's fuel on our tank that has allowed us to embrace some difficult things, go through some hard things, but experience God and see people experience God through all of it.
Well, and I like that. That's a good segue because I remember that conversation, and I remember like God having you and I on a very similar path of what does it mean to get outside of, just the local church. Anyways, but now here you are. What was one of the biggest differences you experienced between being a pastor in a local church and then now shifting into the Navy as a chaplain? What have you noticed is like the differences, similarities, challenges? Like, what was that transition like for you?
So when you go through, and I don't know how the Army guys do it or the Air Force guys. And as a Navy chaplain, so let me kind of put some context around it. As a Navy chaplain, we cover down on the Navy, obviously, but as well as the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard. So we find ourselves in a variety of different contexts. When we go through our training pipeline, one of the things they teach us on the very front end is there is a distinct difference between institutional ministry and what they say is parish ministry, or pastoring in a church or synagogue or mosque or whatever the context may be. And so knowing you got to be able to know those distinctions. Some of the biggest differences that I would say is, one, and this is probably to my fault, but as a Protestant evangelical minister, when I was pastoring churches, because I spent 16 years pastoring churches, 6 of those were at Grace. But over that period of time, I didn't know any Catholic priests.
Right.
I didn't know any Jewish rabbis. I didn't know any Muslim imams, right? And for obvious reasons. Like when, I barely knew the Presbyterian minister down the road, right? I mean, it's just sometimes you don't run in the same circles because everybody's busy and you're tapped out relationally and all kinds of stuff. But in the Navy, because of the wide set of responsibilities we carry, you have to learn to cooperate and coordinate with those that aren't in your faith tradition. So, on average, a typical chaplain will be expected to cover down on anywhere from 12 to 1,600 Marines and sailors. So that's the scope of folk. You're the chaplain.
For that amount.
For that amount of folks.
Wow.
And so if I'm rolling and I meet somebody who wants to meet with a Catholic priest, I better know how to get a hold of a Catholic priest. So that, because that's a really wide swath, it required a level of collaboration that's really distinct in the chaplain corps. Personally, so that's kind of on the professional side of the house. I'll just give 2 examples. On the personal side of the house, nobody asks the chaplain how they're doing. If you're good as a pastor, you'll build a team of people that will ask you that consistently. But even if you're good as a chaplain, it will be difficult to find those people. And it's not because people wouldn't want to do it, but the transient nature of the community doesn't afford that opportunity as much. So there's folks that I've gotten very close with. They live in San Diego now, or they live in Japan now,
right?
Or they're in a different time zone. You're not showing up at the same place every week over an extended period of time. Maybe we got to know each other over the course of 9 months, got really tight, and then they bounced. You're going off. So if you're not intentionally and specifically focused on putting some folks around you to help you, to hold you accountable to what God's called you to, it can be a really hard road. Really, really hard road. I thought it was hard on the pastoral side. It's way harder on the chaplain side.
So how did it, this is a very simple sounding question, but it probably is pretty open-ended. How did it start versus your expectations compared to how it's going now in terms of how you are addressed, how you address, I don't know how any of this works, and I don't know if anybody else does. You hear the word chaplain, and that's why we did the episode on the last one because you don't talk about it much when you're preaching, Mike, but you talk about Blazers and the other night in the locker room at the game. And so I wanted to take us through an episode of what the life of a chaplain is like. So similarly, what is it like? What do you do to structure or organize a place for soldiers to seek faith, to maintain faith, to find faith in what you do? And how have you grown in that over the last 7 years active, I think you said?
Yeah.
How has that changed, and what did it start out like?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. How did it start? Well, I'll say this, when we got our first assignment, it ended up being with the 2nd Marine Air Wing, Marine Air Group 14 out of Cherry Point, North Carolina. And so I covered down on 6 squadrons there. And so they average anywhere from 300 to 400 Marines per squadron. I think what I thought I could do was develop community deep, because that's all I'd never ever known. And so anytime you kind of walk into the room, you have to sort of justify why you're there. Like, why is the pastor showing up? Is he here to preach? So as a chaplain, you don't have to justify that. Oftentimes you show up. So the United States Navy Chaplain Corps has been around since November 26, 1775. So before the birth of our nation, when the Continental Congress, put together for 9 frigates to be built on October 13th, they established the Marine Corps on November 9th, and then they established the Chaplain Corps on November 26th. So, I mean, it's like, or 28th, I can't remember, which is horrible. I should know that number. But it was in relatively short succession that the Chaplain Corps was established. So we are deeply integrated into the life of the sea services. When a chaplain walks into the room, Bruce Crowderfield, he's a retired chaplain now, he's a tremendous mentor of mine. He said, when you walk into the room as a chaplain, you bear the presence of God. And everybody knows that. Now, they might not want you to be in the room, but they know that's what you represent. And so there is that. I think the thing that I quickly learned was, imagine as a pastor just showing up at one of your parishioners' place of business, and everybody thinks it's normal. And it's not like you show up and you check in with the front desk. Like, you have access to the entire business. As a chaplain, that's what it's like. I show up at a command that I'm charged with caring for, and every CO I've ever worked with said, chaps, unless you don't have the security clearance, you have access to every space within my command. And I'm going to let everybody know that so they know who you are, and you can make sure you're caring for my people. That takes some adjustment, because you don't want to be there's a thing we talk about in the chaplain courts, like, don't be the weird chaplain. And if you're not sure what that means, chances are you're the guy. So when you walk into a space, you don't want to be in the way, and you're trying to learn the different mission sets that different commands have. And so you're constantly, you got to be a voracious learner to be able to navigate that world well. But at the same time, because chaplains we're officers as well, so the junior enlisted, they're going to snap to attention when you walk into a space. Right. Well, that's great, because you're honoring the rank that I hold, but at the same time, I'm less concerned with your military bearing, and I'm more concerned with your soul. And I think, like, figuring out that tension, because there's some sailors you look at, or Marines you look at, less with Marines, but you kind of go, you need to snap to attention. Because that is less about because I hold a rank, but because you don't have a posture of honoring people right now. And you need to cultivate that in your heart. So what's going on that's keeping you from doing that? What hasn't been put in you that you need to receive to cultivate that posture towards other folks? So I would say those are some of the, I could probably go on and on, but it's okay. That's some of the tensions that I think trying to figure out how to navigate. How do you work? Like I talked about working with other chaplains. How do you work with folks that are saying things theologically you fundamentally disagree with, and you, like, not on a small way, but on a really big way? And yet still honor them? Like, how do you do that? So, so that's, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it was a really open-ended question. How have you evolved?
I think, how have I evolved? Right now, I'm more convinced than ever before that if you give people the freedom of religion, they will inevitably encounter Christ. So I'm I'm a hard advocate for the First Amendment. Not just the freedom of speech side of the house, but the freedom of religion. And so I've had folks, I remember I had, one of my squadrons was VMGR 252, which they fly the C-130s. This is with the Marine Corps, and, the big tanker planes that they can put Humvees in and, load up troops. These are the planes that when they skydive over the Super Bowl, they jumped out of these planes, right? They refuel aircraft. And so that's the squadron. And they had asked me, I was walking across, my office was in the hangar. So like my office literally looked over the hangar bay where they were working on these C-130s, which is pretty rad if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And I was walking to my office one day, and two of the pilots saw me, and we were chatting, and I said, what do you guys got going on this week? And they said, oh, we're going to Italy because we got to take some parts to one of the detachments out there. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, you want to go? And I was like, sure. So the next thing I know it, I'm on a flight to Italy. Okay, while I'm gone, I had started prior to leaving, I had started a conversation with a chaplain, or not a chaplain, I started a conversation with a Marine about his faith. And he told me, he's like, hey, I want you to know, I'm a Satanist. I was like, I don't think I've ever really met a Satanist. So tell me about that. And he's like, well, I got to go right now, but if you're okay with it, I'll drop off some material for you to look over so you have an understanding of what we actually believe, not just maybe what you've heard. I was like, that'd be great. So like 2 days later, I'm on a plane. I'm going to Italy. We're only gone for like 4 days. I get back, and my supervisory chaplain, I text him, hey, back, I'm going to let you know, Chaplain Gardner, Calvin Gardner, phenomenal guy. He's just a huge mentor of mine. And I said, hey, I want to let you know, sir, I'm back home. He's like, great, swing by my office. I want to talk to you about something. Okay. So I swing by his office, and he goes, I have something here for you. And he reaches down, and he pulls out, and it's on the top is the Satanic Bible. And below that is a series of other satanic books with a Post-it note that is from this Marine that says, for Chaplain Curtis, he was asking for this material.
Oh, geez.
Which isn't quite how I remember that conversation going. And so he goes, I want to know, can you tell me the backstory behind this note? And so I shared it with him. He's like, great. So what was fascinating was I grabbed him. I looked through the material, which was really fascinating, actually. And the Marine swung by my office, and he goes like, hey, did you get the books I left you? I was like, I did. He's like, any questions? And I was like, yeah, take a seat. And we just started talking through stuff. Now, I can't ever imagine that kind of conversation happening pastoring a church. Now, I love the church, so this is not, but that level of accessibility, I had never experienced before. And it was intimidating, a little bit scary. But at the same time, what I saw was a young man who was he had found something that gave him a paradigm in which to understand life. And he was trying to work that out. And it gave me the opportunity. He's like, well, where are you at with this stuff? And if they ask me where I'm at, I can share the gospel. I can share my faith based upon the tenets of the endorser that has, gotten behind me to be in the Navy. And so I shared my faith with that guy, and he thought it was a great conversation. And a couple months later, he swung back by, and we had several interactions, but it was a couple months later, he swung by, and it's like, so how you doing? He's like, I want to let you know, I really got to thinking about some of the things you said, and I'm kind of walking away from this stuff. Because you gave me some things to think about. I'm having to reshift some of my thinking on things. And it's like, okay. I didn't need to come at him and go, hold on, I got some lighter fluid here. Let's burn these books and talk about the Holy Scripture. Like, that didn't need to happen for there to see the needle move. And so I share that encounter to say, because I think it illustrates the shift maybe this is just maturity, I've had to take over time of recognizing everybody's on a journey. My job is to help them discover what the next step is towards God. I don't need them to take the next 20 steps or the steps I think they ought to take. Question is what's the step you need to take to get a little bit closer to what God has for you? And then maybe that will turn into a series of steps that turns into a commitment, that turns into a lifestyle, that turns into an eternal relationship.
That's great. And Mike, you had a comment in an episode recently. We were talking about stages of conversations, how sometimes it's conversation 1 of 15. And you made the comment that one of the reasons we should always be prepared with an answer is you don't know if you're conversation 1 or if you're conversation 15. And I kind of think of that when you're telling me that. And also your openness to sit down and have a discussion. And I think oftentimes my picture of somebody who would be coming to me with something like that would be that you can't have a conversation. And it seems like in today's world, there aren't any conversations anymore. It turns into a shouting match inside of 5 seconds. So good on you for approaching it like that with maturity and with the idea of listening, because you probably, if you had reacted the other way and it had turned into a shouting match, he probably never makes that step. You gave him freedom, you know?
You know, and you saying that, so this is something I realized. So not the command I'm at now, but the last command I was at, I was on a destroyer, I was the command chaplain for 300 people. So way smaller in scope than what is typical. Well, you better learn how to get along with 300 people really quick, because you're going to be out to sea with one another for extended periods of time.
How long were you out?
The longest we were out was 30 days, but we deployed for 4 months. And there was, so as a chaplain, I was one of the department heads, and so you're always coordinating and working with the department heads. And there were some department heads that I had that really quick I could tell they weren't sure that if they were fans of chaplains.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell real quick that if you were to sit us down and, make a list of our core values and how we saw life, there's probably going to be more things not in common than in common. And at the time, I was really wrestling with, Paul writes to the church, in the book of Romans, he writes to the church and he says, honor everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Paul isn't exactly writing that under the most ideal circumstances, right? He's
Right.
imprisoned by a government who's hostile towards his faith. And he's writing a community that is wondering, what it looks like to be a martyr, right? So it's arduous circumstances in which he writes, honor everyone. And I think that's probably one of the things that I don't have an answer to right now, but I constantly ask the Spirit to give me wisdom on. How do I honor this person in a way that draws out within them, they are image bearers of God. So how do I draw that out, highlight that, because that's the thing I can get on board with, and then step into relationship with them. And it's been an absolute delight, because the folks that we would normally not be friends under any other circumstances, I've actually become really good friends with.
I love hearing that, because what's so cool about the story with the guy that you had the conversation with is, because you had mentioned one of the challenges, it's very transitionary, like in the NBA, guys come in and they're traded a month later or a year later.
Yeah.
So you've got this, you're trying to make the most of every opportunity.
Yeah.
So here's a guy that for whatever season he was in your life, you're able to do that, and planting seeds in that, and then they move on and so forth, and just trusting the Lord that there's a bigger scope of others that he can bring into their life. When you think about going, how many times did you guys go out to sea in your 7 years?
We deployed twice in 22 months.
What's that like? When you guys go out to sea, and as a chaplain, what are the things you feel you have to address? Like, so what are the issues? What are the concerns, the struggles that those that are on the ship are needing help with on a consistent basis? What are you helping them? Is it loneliness? Is it fears? Is it claustrophobia? I mean, what are the struggles on the ship that you as a chaplain can be there to help? Is it they're separated from family? Is it finding purpose? What are the things that you have seen consistently that you're able to help be there for them when they're out to sea?
Oh man, that's a long list. So the beauty of it is, and this is where collaboration with other chaplains becomes really critical, because there's a cycle to deployments. There's what the workup cycle is. Everybody's excited. Yeah, we got this mission. We're going to go do this thing. And then that leads to, shoot, it's 3 weeks away, and I don't know if I'm ready to go. And I just realized I'm going to miss my kid's birthday. And if we get extended, I'm going to miss my kid's graduation. Like so the reality sets in. Then you get out on mission, and you're going. So there, and then a third of the way in, there's a bit of a grind, but you're settling into a norm. Halfway through, you're kind of tired, wore out. When's our port call? Because I'm sick and tired of looking at these people. So there's this cycle to it. If what I found valuable was I don't. It's not so much about identifying what the issues are. It is, but it's more critical that I ensure leadership is empowered and equipped to help sailors wrestle with issues, and that I'm available, constantly present and available to sailors to get ahead of the curve on stuff before it becomes a big deal. And I think, when I think back to some issues where we had sailors that were just not in a good place, usually it was because they didn't let anybody in. They didn't tell somebody what was going. They didn't tell anybody that they just found out their mom has cancer. Why wouldn't you tell anybody that? Well, I don't know who I can trust. Well, that tells me something about your leadership. What has your leadership done or not done to break down trust or not build trust? So then I'm pulling leadership aside, like, hey, how's your sailor doing? What's going on with this? What's going on? We even developed I'm a bit of a dork. And so I built we do this thing on the ships called Human Factors Council, where once a month, a report is presented to the CO about the stress levels of the sailors. So if you're green, it means you have stress, but you're doing well. Yellow means might be losing some sleep. You're a bit fatigued, but you're okay. You're in the fight. Orange is it's sustained, but we have some mitigations within the life of the command to help address that. Red is we've got to get you out of here because you are not in a good place, and the resources we have within the life of the command can no longer support you. So every month, the CO is supposed to find out how his crew is doing. But when I stepped into the command, there wasn't a great way to identify that. Well, those that have served with whether the Air Force, Army, or Navy Air Wing, this is a common practice within the air portion of our services, because they are constantly assessing the pilots and the flight crews, because they recognize that fatigue can lead to missing tools. Missing tools might be left in an engine. That plane takes off, an engine blows up, aircraft goes down, loss of life, right? So they've always been doing this. Well, so now we're adopting this into other branches or other aspects of the services. And so what I did is I put together a resource where each month every division officer and their chief would assess everybody in their shop, which could be as little as 6 and as many as 14. So not a ton, like a manageable group. And they were like, how you doing? And it doesn't have to be a kneecap to kneecap thing. It could be shoulder to shoulder type conversation. But then they would turn that report in. As the chaplain, I would collect all those reports, and then I could show my CO graphically how the crew was. The other piece of it was then I'm able to identify trends. So I might have one shop that is super stressed, but maybe it's the electric shop. Well, it's because we haven't pulled into port and been able to get the right resources on board to get them the parts and pieces they need to solve these problems. And so the need isn't going. So you're able to kind of also stitch together a narrative of how's the ship doing based upon how people are responding to the stressors in their life. When we started it, 38% of the crew responded as in the green. Everybody else was yellow, orange, few in red. By the time I left, we deployed twice. We did a home port change, meaning we went from Spain back to the States. By the time I left, we were at a sustained level of on average 77%.
Wow.
And what I found was, and this is what I attribute it to, was when leadership, like your first direct report, was engaged with you as a sailor on a consistent basis, helping you process the stressors that were in your life, your stress levels went down, even though your circumstances didn't change.
Yeah.
Because you felt like I'm being heard.
Right.
At least I know that this isn't being, disregarded or ignored or whatever the case may be, that somebody's listening to me. There is a way forward. We just have to get there. And so I think that's the learning how to put the right, learning how to work with leadership in a decentralized way so that we can have the centralized effort was probably one of the biggest challenges. But the beauty of it was, and I credit, like, it wasn't because of me. I was just a forcing agent in a lot of that. But I had khaki leadership on board, meaning officers in the chief's mess, to be able to really implement this in a way that was meaningful. And it like when I share this with military folks, we went an entire deployment without having to fly anybody off the ship due to mental health losses.
It's amazing to hear you. I'm kind of imagining having to care for all of these men, stuff you don't really think about when you think about the military. But I would think it would be a much bigger challenge in terms of having guys feel like they were heard because they're in the military and you're supposed to be these tough guys, this first line of defense, and maybe convincing guys that it's okay to talk about things when maybe their role as men and women in service or on a ship, on a battleship, knowing what's at stake, they wouldn't be allowed, at least in their own mind, to have issues or weaknesses or vulnerabilities worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely exists out there. And I think, again, getting leadership in the military is such a critical, it's the trendsetter in people's lives, because even like on a ship when you're out to sea, that's your life. So who you work with is who you're sleeping next to, and because you're in a rack situation. I mean, you can't get away from this is your life for the next X amount of period of time. So engaged leadership isn't a 9-to-5 thing,
right?
It's all encompassing. What I saw was when I had leaders that were willing to be appropriately vulnerable at the appropriate ranks, then they could, ends up, I want to say trickling down. It trickles up and down. Mm-hmm. It just becomes part of the culture within the command. So I'll give you an example. With the command master chief I had on the boat, him and I became really good friends. And when it became a common knowledge that at 1930, that's when I swing by his office, I knock on his door, and I'm checking with him. I'm asking if there's any hot spots on the ship, meaning are there any issues that I need to be helping advise?
And what about with him?
And then checking in with him.
Gotcha.
And it's not me. I'm not going to tell anybody I'm checking in with him.
Right.
That's not my news to share. Mm-hmm. But when he's telling everybody, hey, if you haven't already, you should probably ask the chaps to swing by your shop, or you should swing by his office, or you should invite him in. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden that sets what's normative. You're still going to have the guys that are like, I'm fine. And it's always, it's always interesting that I like to smoke cigars with whoever was willing to smoke cigars, out on our flight deck, because we're the DDG Type 2 Alpha. And so we have a flight deck that helicopters can land on. And that's where we would go with the weather supported to smoke cigars. And it was amazing at how, just in that context, I would have conversations with guys. They're never going to swing by my office.
Right.
They're never going to invite me into their shop. And it starts off with talking about whatever parts broke or whatever mission set's coming up or whatever it is. And then it's like real quick you go, hey, I know you haven't seen your son in a while because whatever life circumstances have kept that from happening. How are you doing with that? Oh, I'm fine. When's their birthday? Well, it was last week. How'd that go? Well, I tried reaching out, but they were ghosting me. All of a sudden you're talking about it, right? And in that moment, they were to say, have you ever talked to the chaps? Do you know what they're going to say?
Right.
No.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Because I'm good. But I don't care. Are they going to be a better chief? Are they going to be a better division officer or department head? Are they going to be a better first class? With their crew, when they've had a chance to get that off their chest, go support somebody. And I think that's the thing that I've learned is, like, one of the beautiful things about being in the service is just the clarity of mission. Like, this is the mission. This is what matters more than anything else, period. This is the mission. And it's not a trivial thing. This is our responsibility, and if we do this well, then we're on point. And I think aligning your life towards a really clear mission with other people brings a level of camaraderie that is, and the Marines call it esprit de corps, that is not easily broken. And I think, if, kind of bringing it into a fellowship of brothers type, Christian brothers type thing, if we can do that for one another.
Correct.
And the mission not being who's bringing the dip to the Super Bowl party. Like, no, the mission is, what are we going to do to impact our neighbors for Christ, or our coworkers, or our, estranged family members, or just maybe not bring them, but at minimum demonstrate the love of Christ to them. Like, if we can get that level of clarity, man, a lot of stuff, unnecessary things are seen as unnecessary really quickly.
You guys both being chaplains, and Mike, you can talk about this too. It's like the definition of a chaplain. People would say, you hold a church service and then you walk around with a Bible, but you're part life coach, part counselor, part pastor, it sounds like it to me, with big responsibilities and the ability to both encourage, defuse, and change lives, really change lives.
Well, I think that's, and I love that question, because that makes me want to circle back to something you said too, Milo, was when people carry the title of chaplain, there is those expectations. There is that. There's the pressure at times right now. You have to be a therapist. At other times you're a life coach. At other times you're a marriage counselor. I mean, whatever it is. And there is that. You got to host a service, and hey, we got all these questions. Do you have all the answers? And I think there is the pressure that can be laid on that. But one of the things that I always try to figure out is, how do we get just people who are going, I don't have the title of chaplain, but live with the same mission? Because I think that often, like when you just said, you're on the flight deck there and you're smoking cigars with a guy and talking about mechanic stuff and what's broke, and then all of a sudden you looked at him and said, hey, when's the last time you spent time with your son? What I have found, and we say this in the NBA, I wonder if it's the same in the Navy, it's a ministry of presence. And so most of the conversations, it's just being intentional with care questions. And sure, it can get to places where, like, we can get way outside our, I don't know if I have answers to all that. Even as chaplain, we don't have answers to everything. So if that's the prerequisite, then none of us will be qualified for that. But I wonder if how many times someone just says, I work at Nike. What if you went to Nike and you said, you may not call yourself a chaplain, but you have the same mission.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting with a coworker and you're asking the same types of care questions. You're asking them, do you mind if I pray for you? If that's something they want, or how are you doing? I think there's a way of shoring that gap between us that are like chaplains, and we're all called to ministry. We're all called to be a witness. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Milo?
You sharing that makes me think. So my dad is a general contractor.
Yeah.
And when I was 14 years old, he somehow worked out the timing that in the mail that day, I got, the day I turned 14, I got my worker's permit. So he looked at me and he said, you know what? From this day forward, I'm going to make sure you're educated. I'm going to make sure you have a roof over your head. I'm going to make sure there's food on your plate, but everything else is on you, because I'm giving you a job. So you're going to get out into the field and during the summer work in construction, which when you're 14 years old and all your other buddies are going to basketball camp and going to the lake and going to the beach is a miserable, proposition. But there's a cornucopia of gifts that provided me. One of those was, I show up on these job sites 14, 15, 16 years old. And real quick, I learned when I get there, I should keep my mouth shut during the lunch break. I'm just going to observe. I'm going to learn, see who's who in the zoo, what are their interests, because I have zero credit. Because oftentimes I was dumped on a job site, and they didn't know I was the boss's son. I was just a cheap hire. And I never told anybody I was the boss's son. And what I learned through that was, if you show up and are willing to listen before you're trying to be impressive, over time you will gain the credibility to speak. And I share that in contrast to, we would get some temp laborers from the temp agencies, and they'd come in and be like, I just came from this job, and I've done this, and I've roofed that, and have you ever seen this building? I did that, blah, blah, blah. And then 4 days later, you can tell they don't know what they're doing. So they oversold themselves. They took on a set of responsibilities, and now they're just a hot mess that's unreliable, untrustworthy, and everybody's having to clean up stuff behind them. So I thought, well, I don't want to be that guy. I share that to say, like, I learned to just, this is like, I didn't learn it because, like, the wisdom of the Lord showed it to me. Like, as a survival technique, I learned to keep my mouth shut unless I want to get shouted down and made fun of. Over a period of time, what I noticed was, so now I'm in college, still every summer and winter break, I'm working for my dad. And I remember distinctly there was this one job site where there was a guy who was a really strong believer. And during lunch break, he wouldn't have lunch with the guys in the job shack. He would go to his truck. Now, the jokes these guys told during lunch and the stories I heard were both vivid
Oh, yeah. And colorful.
and incredibly colorful. And so, you know, I'm hearing all these things. And one day a guy looks at me, he goes, hey, Milo, you're a Christian, right? Because they knew I went to Bible college. They go, like, you're a Christian, right? I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, question. Why is so-and-so sitting in his truck right now? Because he's a Christian. So he says he doesn't want to be around us during lunch.
Right.
Why are you willing to be around us during lunch? And this is not a judgment on this guy who went to this truck. But what I realized was, if I wanted to have a voice in these guys' lives, I had to be present with these guys. Which means I had to be present even amidst the nonsense. Now, it didn't mean I had to give into it. It doesn't mean I come in one day with my dirty joke, right? It doesn't, I don't have to buy in and contribute to the nonsense. But it might mean I have to stomach it. So that there can be a moment when I can speak to it. And it was fascinating is one day me and a guy had to do a run to pick up some supplies, and we get in the truck and we're taking off. And he goes, hey, tell me about your faith. And I began to share with him where I was at with God and what I was learning about the Lord. And he opened up to me and he was like, you know, I've never told him. And all of a sudden he starts telling me he hasn't quite figured out God and he's not sure where he's at with God. And all of a sudden these things come out. And I guarantee if I had gone somewhere else during that lunch break, that moment would have never opened itself up. So to your, it's a long way for me to agree with you that to be present, and I didn't do any of that because I was a pastor or minister at the time.
Exactly.
Like I just did all that because, that seems to be where the opportunity is.
Which is a clear example of that's exactly who Christ was.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the life of Christ and you go, he didn't insulate himself and expect everybody to perfect himself to get to them. He did the opposite of that. And that's the thing that, you know, as we're, you know, having this conversation, everybody that's listening to us right now, hope you're encouraged that you are called to that same thing. Whether you have that title or not, you're on a ship or you're in a stadium, it's a calling on all of us. It's that mission clarity of every day, whether you work at Intel, Nike, gas pump, you know, grocery, whatever, fixing cars, go into every day with my mission is I am a follower of Jesus first, and then whatever your role, title, job is second, and see what God will do with that. And because one of the fun things, we were catching up over lunch today, and we could do a whole maybe part 2 episode later, but I love how you started with a yes. I think there's something powerful about the obedient calling on each of our lives, and yours took you around the world in the Navy and seen a lot of things, but you're where you're at today because of one act of obedience. There was a yes. And then there's been several of yeses that follow behind that first yes. But it took that first one to go, okay, God, you're tugging my heart in this direction. I clearly can see you're moving. I'm going to be obedient to that. and then the next day and the next day and so forth. What would you say to guys or everybody that's listening right now is, how can you walk in obedience in your life and the power of a yes, and not even knowing where it always goes? But there's been challenges for you being a Navy. I mean, you and I've stayed in touch over these years, and I've got to share things with you, struggles, and you've got to kind of be a safe place and go back and forth. But so yeses come with challenges. Yes, come with struggles. But if there's anybody that's listening right now that might be on the verge of, I think God's calling me into something, and I don't know yet, what would you encourage them from what you've learned in your journey?
So there are two things. One is something I've been living with for a long time, and one of these things is relatively fresh for me. So one is, do not think that the cloud of uncertainty that surrounds you is justification to be hesitant. Years ago, I read a quote from Andy Stanley where he said, leadership takes place in the context of uncertainty. Well, if that's true, which I think it is, if I expand that out, then if Jesus is leading me, there will always be a measure of uncertainty. Or else why? Because I don't know. That's why I'm following him. And so don't think that there's going to be this cloud of uncertainty that's lifted, because it won't. It's just not going to happen. The question is what are you certain of? Are you certain that this is the next thing he's calling you to? Is this what it looks like to trust in him right now? If the answer to that is yes, and you know that in your soul, because the Spirit's already telling you, that's the thing, then that is your next thing. Well, but I don't know how. Great, got it. That's not the question. Do you know this is your next step? Yes, then take it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I know because we all, anytime you're following Christ, it's a new, and you're going into uncertainty, that is a desperately new experience for you. But it doesn't mean it's a new experience to a man's pursuit of God. There's a great line I heard. I found this during COVID, when we were locking everybody down, and how bad is this, and all this uncertainty. How what is this looking like? And I read this quote from, I'm going to butcher the details of it, but I'll get to the heart of it. And it was a quote it was something that C.S. Lewis wrote and read in his radio address to the British people as they were being bombed by the Blitzkrieg. And he said this. So World War II, the Brits are holding out, waiting for the Allies to show up so that, we can knock out this Nazi regime. His admonition to the British people was this. He said, let us not exaggerate the novelty of our situation. There has always been famine. There has always been starvation. There has always been war. There has always been pestilence. Yet we have always found a way through it. And so I'd say whatever your situation is, press forward into the uncertainty, but do not exaggerate the novelty of your situation. Because while it's new to you, it's probably not new to somebody else. So seek out that advisement. Seek out that strength. Seek out that wisdom from other folks that have gone before you so that you can move forward with the confidence that God has for you.
That's great. That's good.
When you're I was thinking about your story a minute ago about being on a ship and on a mission, and then how those things change. They're almost individual periods of your life and periods of lives when you are around a certain number of guys, and then a whole new circle of guys comes in. That's got to be strange for you. You're not trying to complete somebody, perhaps as you're in their life for a season of life, but do you keep in contact with the guys that you serve in the military? And are there some that you look back on and didn't quite get it finished, and then you want to reconnect with them? How many? You must have contact with so many sailors over time, I would think, who know their story, and then some who you've just seen and you take pride in, that you've assisted them in conquering whatever it was in front of them that they're dealing with, and then others maybe that Never quite got there, but it's got to be so many interesting stories, and the brushes that you've had with the numbers of individuals that you have has to be astronomical.
Yeah, I don't have a great, and this is probably my shame. I don't have a really great handle on what that is, because like you said, it's a transient community.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's not a church body.
No, you're not looking at me like, hey, we've been together for 17 years, right? It's not, especially as a chaplain, because we're spread all over the place. Now, you might have some folks in this Marine Corps or Navy that they've worked around the same people because their specific Navy rate or MOS is so dialed in that that's a relatively small group of folks that operate, so they kind of get to know one another well. But as a chaplain, yeah, it's spread really, really wide. And I think, and to be honest with you, that's one of my frustrations.
I'm sure.
Because
you don't get the time?
Because you don't get the time, and you don't get the joy of watching, Paul planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. Well, I may have planted, and maybe another chaplain watered, but I don't even have the joy of watching anything increase.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't even know where they're at.
Right.
Now, Facebook's a wonderful tool in that regard.
Right.
To be able to track folks and see how they're doing, and some every now and then they'll chime in. And it's always an absolute delight when somebody reaches out. It's like, hey, how are things? You're like, man, I didn't even know. Where are you?
Yeah.
And well, I'm stationed here now. And, so there's that delight. But I also think in that regard, that's been a growth area for me. That was kind of at the top of the podcast. You asked me that question. That's been a growth area for me, which is I have to surrender the joy of seeing progress.
Seeing, not to wherever complete, but completion.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which means I have to be more deeply sold into the mission and vision that God's put upon my heart to do this kind of work right now, because I'm not doing it to see a tangible effect on the other side. I'm doing it because he's asked me to do it.
I asked Pastor Mike this a while back. I would think militarily, and we know how it is in the regular world, but as tensions rise or there's something in the news or a war that we hear, I would have to think your job gets busier. Is that true, or are these guys conditioned to roll with the tide on a war that sparks or a hot spot in the world that they may or may not get called into? Is there more need? I mean, dumb question, but is there, I would think there would be more need, more anxiety. Perhaps Chaps gets a little busier when these guys know something, the heat's getting turned up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true with anybody that's facing any sort of conflict in their life, right?
Sure.
So if a guy's got to go home and tell his wife something she doesn't want to hear, having somebody in your life that can help encourage you on your way to go have that hard conversation, it becomes a valuable, advocate in the pursuit of that, doing that difficult thing. I do think, remember, so our ship was a Forward Deployed Naval Forces Europe ship, FDNFE ship for a period of time, which means we were stationed out of Rota, and we would either operate within the Mediterranean or up into the Baltic Sea. And they had been out, I had just gotten to the command, and we had been out for 4 months, got back. We were supposed to have 4 months off before we pushed out again. And then they came back and said, well, no, you're going to be home. You're going to be back for 3 months because you have to pick up this other mission, which means you got to go out sooner. All right, so we went into the holiday break, and then we got word that, no, that 3 months has been now reduced to within 72 hours, you need to be out of here.
Wow.
Because it looks, so this is a couple years ago now, but it looks like Russia's going to invade Ukraine, and we need an American presence up in the Baltic Sea to reassure our NATO allies and the partner nations we have up there, and let Russia know we're here. So, all right, roger that. We get all of our stuff together. Folks are spinning. I was new to the command, but I knew a lot of the folks, and so, I know they're excited, they're exhausted, they're a little crusty on the outside, gooey in the middle, and so we push out. And as we're going up, there's this gal. I'll never forget this moment. I hope I never forget this moment, because we're steaming. I mean, we're cleared hot to go a certain I can't, I'm not going to tell you how fast we were going because I think that's classified, but we were getting up there, right? And so we're steaming up there, and I see this one sailor who's brand new to the command. Like so this is in early January. She graduated from high school in June. So she's like brand spanking new. A year ago, she was writing a letter to Santa, right? So we're steaming on our way up there, and I see her, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And she goes, What are we doing?" So I was like, CEO told us this is the mission, this is what we're doing. She's like, "Are we going to war?" This is what she said. "This is not what I signed up for." Which I'm sitting here thinking, well, it kind of is. Yeah. And she's like, what could this be? And I was like, well, we don't know. Now, fortunately, we did not go to war with Russia. But, it was kinetic enough not kinetic, but it was tense enough that, when we were up there, you could go up topside and see the Russian ships that were around us, and they could see us, and I see you, you see me, type of thing. And so it was, it was a tense period of time. In a moment like that, life gets really simple really fast. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the things that I used to care about don't have the same level of urgency as other things do. And I think that's a gift that I think a lot of us could maybe live with a little bit more of. There's a little bit more of that urgency.
It's constant perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sharpens the perspective.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we got to ask I got to ask because I'm curious. You came and spoke at the church, I don't know how long ago it was, and you had all these pictures of these battleships and stuff that you were on, and it was amazing. What in your 7 years now of active, what's the coolest thing you've ever gotten to do in the military? And I'm just asking you that because I kind of want to geek out because I only know it through the movies, like most people. So what are some really cool things you've gotten to do in parts of the world that you probably thought you never would see?
So this is, I'm going to give you probably the gung-ho answer first, because I know that's the thing that maybe some folks,
Yeah.
It was pretty rad when I was the chaplain, Naval Station Rota, which is in Rota, Spain. I was the chaplain at the chapel there. And we were getting word that, hey, as a chaplain, you better have your sea bag ready to go at a moment's notice, to go down range to address whatever. Well, I don't know what that means. What am I putting in my sea bag? I don't even have that packing list. And so I approached my supervisory chaplain at the time, and I said, hey, I don't have that list. Would you be okay if I rode one of our ships for a period of time to learn what that looks like? So the first time I step onto the ship, it's not my first time.
It's not your first time.
Yeah. And he's like, absolutely. So USS Ross, which was actually dealing with some of the Houthi stuff not too long ago. I've been on that ship. Was the chaplain for a little while on that ship. And so we push out to sea, and I'm lost in the sauce, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning a bunch of stuff. I know a couple people. Most folks are looking at me like, why are you here? It's over the Thanksgiving break. I'm learning I'm making all the mistakes, which is great, because one of my philosophies in life is fail fast. The faster you fail, the quicker you learn. The quicker you learn, the better you're going to be able to serve folks. Well, it comes time for me to leave the ship. The problem is we're out at sea, and we're not pulling in anytime soon because the port calls kept getting canceled. And I've got to get off the ship because I got to get home because I have a flight with my family back to Oregon because I'm speaking at Grace Chapel at the end, in 2.5 weeks or whatever it is, right? So there was this I got to get out of here. And I was finally talking with the operations officer. I said, I have to be off the ship this date. He's like, well, the only way we can do that is if we fly in a helicopter, you get on board. It's going to take you to the USS Truman, which is an aircraft carrier. You'd stay the night there. Then you'd get launched off of that, which is called a cod flight, which will take you to Sigonella, Italy. And then from there, you'll be able to fly to Madrid, and then from Madrid down to Rota. And I was like, let's
go.
Yeah. And so that moment when a helicopter's inbound and its express purpose is to pick you up, like, talk about the best Uber ride ever.
Totally.
And then when I got on the ship, I got on the so I left the Porter or the Ross, got on the Truman. I met the chaplains that were there. They were incredibly gracious to me. They showed me all the ins and outs. I remember we were in the Mediterranean. You could see literally the coast of Italy at night. You could see the city lit up that we were passing. And I remember going to on the flight deck of the USS Truman with one of the chaplains, and we went out to the very end and we prayed for the crew, because he had a list of prayer requests he collected that day. And every night he would go to the end of the tarmac of that carrier and pray for the crew. We prayed for our family. I mean, it's just like, that's,
Wow.
I mean, you know, in a moment like that, I mean, there's more of these than I can care to count, to be honest with you. Like, I'm sitting here going, whose life is this?
Yeah, right.
This is not what I ever imagined I would be able to be doing. And it's like, those moments are gifts. Yeah. So so that's kind of the cool thing. Probably the more, personally significant moments, are the chances to have really candid and hard conversations with people in incredibly trying and difficult circumstances, where they're looking at a series of decisions that they've made that have put them in a really bad place. And in that moment, they're open to the gospel. I'll if I never fly off a helicopter again, but I get those opportunities, I'll take that all day. Yeah. Because that's the, you know, if I can help a guy be a better husband and father, I can help a gal be a better mother or wife. Like, that's where we live life. To me, that's the good stuff.
And your answer is usually kind of the same when I talk to you and
it's
ask
funny,
you the same
we're
things.
literally sitting here, you know, because we have a game tonight. It's gonna be a big game. Milwaukee's back in town. Dame's back in town. It's gonna be a big game. So I'll be heading to the arena here in probably a little bit. While we're having this conversation, there's a guy that just texted me, not a player, but a guy that because there's all employees and there's a lot of people invited to chapel, and I've seen him now for 5 years. Said hi to him in the hallways. Always had a great hey. And just the other day, he's like, "Hey man, just lost my dad. He's never been to a chapel." He's like, "Can I come tonight?" After 5 years of just, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" Hallways, and just text me while we're talking here. "Hey, can't wait to come to chapel tonight. Can we meet before?" So it's the same thing. That it's that just present consistency with whoever God places in your life for however long it is.
Yeah.
It might be 1 week, 3 years, a month. God puts people in our lives for reasons, and just making the most of those opportunities, and then trusting the Lord that we can plant. Somebody else might do the watering. Somebody else might do the reaping, but we all play a part in each other's lives with what God wants to do. And that's what's fun. I told Milo this, we got done with lunch today. Before we wrap up, I said, it's been super fun for me from the very first day you said yes. When that conversation, you say, "Hey, this God's warming my heart to being a chaplain," and to see where you're at now. That's fun for me to see the simple or hard yes, but to where it's led to now and the impact that God's using you all around the world. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
It's amazing, and it's proud. We're proud of you. We're proud of that. The answer was yes. I don't think everybody has the discernment to know what their calling is, but and then to have the discipline to say yes and to obey. And so we could go on. We have to have another one of these, because I got about 40 more dork questions I want to ask you. Because like I said, I mean, most people you hear about, well, first of all, military, but then secondly, battleships and the Baltic and the Mediterranean, and there's just so many questions. So we're going to have to do this again. But to hear kind of the lives you're impacting and the responsibility you carry humbly, in the service. So thank you on behalf of everybody. You know, we always like to thank anybody who's serving, which you are, and you're, for lack of a better term, you're shepherding those who are serving. And I made the comment a minute ago, the cliche, the last line of defense or the first line of defense. Well, I think for souls in our military, people like you are that, and certainly with what you're doing. So thank you.
No, thank you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it very much. And what's your podcast again before we say goodbye?
Resilient Lineage.
All right, look it up. That is Navy chaplain Milo Curtis, a friend and a brother, and doing good works on the open seas, and in bases around the world.
There you go. There you go.
We appreciate you as always spending some time with us here on Vertical Pursuit, and we will see you next time. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.